Hi, I'm Lynn Mento, the leader of Conservation Nation. Conservation Nation is a new nonprofit that's dedicated to saving wildlife and their habitats by bringing a larger and more inclusive and therefore stronger core of conservationists to the fight today and tomorrow. Specifically, that means providing funding to conservationists emerging and existing from underrepresented groups like women, people of color, those from disadvantaged communities, indigenous people, and inspiring and educating young people everywhere to see themselves as wildlife champions, all the way up to pursuing a STEM academic and career path into conservation. This is episode 1 of the new Conservation Nation speaker series, where we're bringing together some amazing conservationists from around the globe to have a conversation with us about the work that they're doing to save wildlife and their habitats, the challenges they faced, how they got here, and an opportunity for you, our guests, to ask them questions and interact with them as well. And I could not think of a more relevant and important topic to kick off the Conservation Nation speaker series than this one right now about marine and freshwater conservation. So it's really everything Conservation Nation stands for. It's an absolutely critical conservation need. So the oceans are the largest ecosystem on Earth, and they act as the planet's life support system. And they're clearly in trouble. You have read this. They are in trouble. They need our help. And fresh water is the connector of water to people. So it's life giving in that way. And freshwater species are declining by up to 84% in a recent assessment. And of course, it happens to be World Water Day, which you may not have known or sent your Hallmark card on, but it is World Water Day and smack in the middle of a Women's History Month. So it's the perfect topic to be having. So it's a critical conservation need, and it's also an absolutely critical equity and inclusion need as well. So women have struggled to advance in up the ladder in conservation in general, but it's particularly pronounced in marine and freshwater conservation. Working on the water has traditionally been a man's world. In fact, I was floored by this. By law, women were not allowed to be on aquatic research vessels until 1960. So, more than just about any other field in wildlife conservation, marine and freshwater conservation has fewer women in leadership roles and fewer women authoring major papers. And very sadly, according to a recent study in Women in Ocean Science, 78% of women have experienced sexual harassment in marine science. So, I love what this oceanographer, Peter Gerges over at Harvard, said. In the absence of gender equality, we're doing mediocre science. And I love that from this oceanographer because he's not only talking about doing what's right, he's talking about doing what's right for the planet, gender equality and equity in marine and freshwater conservation. So tonight we have 3 amazing women who, thank goodness for us and our children to come, are working on saving the oceans and our freshwater systems around the globe. And I'm so looking forward to this conversation with them. And I think you will adore them as I do too. So we have Dr. Nikki Traylor-Knowles, who is assistant professor in the Department of Marine Biology and Ecology at the University of Miami. And she's the founder of BWEAMS, a nonprofit organization, Black Women in Ecology, Evolution, and Marine Science. And you'll hear Nikki talk more about that and why she started BWEAMS. We have Robin Abel, who is the freshwater lead at Conservation International. And we have Tania Romero Bautista, who is a new Conservation Nation grantee, a Fulbright Fellow, and she's pursuing her PhD right now at the Tropical Rivers Lab at Florida International University. So you will hear from each of these women as they talk about how they got, who they are and how they got into their roles. And then we'll open it up for some questions. I'll be asking them some questions. We'll have a dialogue, and then we'll look for the audience to ask questions as well. So I'm so excited about that. And with that, I just want to welcome our panel of 3 amazing women working in marine and freshwater conservation. And thank you so much for being part of the next 45 minutes. So I'm going to turn it over first to Dr. Traylor-Knowles, who's going to introduce herself, and then we'll go through the panel like that. So Nikki, over to you.
Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. Hi, Lynn. Thank you so much for the invitation. As Lynn mentioned, my name is Dr. Nikki Traylor-Knowles. I am currently an assistant professor at the University of Miami, Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences. my laboratory studies coral reefs, and specifically, we're really interested in the immune system of corals. And so we do a lot of cell biology and other types of work to understand, what is going on within the coral reefs. So I work with a lot of students, and I mentor a lot of students, both in their graduate work as well as in just undergrad research. And I also have been very committed to DEI initiatives. So for myself, as a Black woman in science, it's been very challenging because many times I'm alone. And so part of my way of dealing with that was to start the group BWEAMS that Lynn mentioned. It's called Black Women in Marine Black Women in Ecology, Evolution, and Marine Science. And it was started as a way in which to give community and to give a voice to Black women in ecology, evolution, and marine science. So that has been the nonprofit started in 2020, and now we're growing and expanding our programs. We do a lot of virtual professional development as well as mentorship programs for Black women that are usually from the ages of or the career stages of undergrad through career professional. So it's been really amazing, both selfishly because I've met so many amazing Black women scientists, but also innovation wise, because we're able to come together and come up with amazing ideas and interact. So I'm really happy to be here and excited to talk with Lynn and the other panelists about my journey and science.
Thank you so much, Nikki, and looking forward to hearing more. Now over to Robin Abel.
Such a pleasure to be here tonight. As Lynn mentioned, I am a freshwater conservationist. I have been doing this for a long time. I typically work on global freshwater biodiversity conservation, but where I am today was not preordained from the beginning. If you could show the first photo, please. You're going to see a photo of me at around age 4 or 5 from a trip to Cape Cod when I was young. I'm the little one in this photo holding a hermit crab that I caught. We would go and catch these hermit crabs and put them in buckets with water and sand, and I would just watch them all day. I was fascinated by them. Next photo, please. Whoops, a little out of order. That's okay. This is a photo of me several years later, moving from hermit crabs to in the marine environment to the freshwater environment. So this is a fish, but not the kind an animal fish. This is a sunfish sailboat. When I was about 10 years old, we moved to a house on a small man-made lake in suburban Washington, D.C. area. And I actually never learned how to sail this boat. It was just a cast off from someone, but I did have a canoe, and I would spend a lot of time in the canoe alone on this lake, paddling around, looking for fish, looking for turtles, looking for water birds, what have you. And if I got maybe a little lazy, instead, I would go down to our little dock. I would take my shoes and socks off, and I would actually put little pieces of cheese in between my toes. And I would stick my feet in the water and wiggle them around and wait for the fish to come and visit me and eat the cheese from between my toes. And again, I was just really interested in watching wildlife, but it didn't matter what kind of wildlife it was. It could be hermit crabs, it could be bluegills, it could be crickets, it could be squirrels in my backyard. I was just enthralled by all of this. And you might think from that last photo that living on a lake was my pathway to becoming a freshwater conservationist, but in fact it wasn't. What happened was when I finished college, and this was a while ago, mind you, I didn't have any plan at all for what I was going to do. And I ended up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I went to the Museum of Southwestern Biology, which is in the University of New Mexico. And I just started knocking on doors, the ornithology door, mammalogy, herpetology, all of them. And I said, here I am. I can work for you. I'll do anything. Please hire me. And at the time, they all said, thank you so much, but we don't have anything for you. So I went back to wherever I was staying at the time, I don't recall, and I wrote thank you notes to everyone who spent the time talking with me. And then some days later, I got a call from the head of the ichthyology department, the fish department. And if you know anything about New Mexico geography, you will know that any fish that we're studying in New Mexico are freshwater fish. So he called me in and he said, I actually have a job for you. And I said, oh, that's great, but you didn't have one a few days ago. What happened? And he said, honestly, you're the first person who's ever written me a thank you note. So there's maybe a little bit of a lesson in there, but my point is that, again, it was not preordained that I would become a freshwater conservationist or a conservation biologist, but the fact that that guy opened the door for me and let me in and gave me a job was the beginning of my path to becoming a freshwater scientist. And after that, I went to graduate school, got a master's in aquatic ecology, then from there went straight into my career, first with an internship, and that internship turned into 16 years at my first organization, and then sort of additive professions after that, or stops along the way, and here I am today. Thank you.
That's great, Robin. And I both love and I'm horrified that you put cheese between your toes. So that was fabulous. And now on to Tania, our last introduction.
Hi, everyone. I also want to thank you, Conservation Nation, for inviting me to this event. I'm happy to share and learn from all of you. So my name is Tania Romero Bautista, and I have a background in sustainable development and conservation-based projects and community-based conservation projects. I mean, I was born and raised in Madre de Dios in Peru, and most of my career are also like Robin also did a lot of volunteerism, and part of my one of my big success in my career was when I was the first in my region to be awarded the Fulbright graduate scholarship, and that's me with other Fulbright scholars. So that was a great experience. And this scholarship allowed me to study a master's degree in sustainable development at University of Florida. And as part of this experience, I also participate in different events, and I think it was the first experience for me to trying to learn more for the academic world. So I am participating in an international conference of sustainable development in Columbia University in New York. And then I have been having experience in doing research. In like the first time that I did research, I conduct research as the main investigator. And later, I also have experience doing research in my own region in Las Piedras in Peru. Currently, I am a PhD student in the Department of Earth and Environment at Florida International University. And I am working with Dr. Elizabeth Anderson in the Tropical Rivers Lab. And I'm working on my research, and this summer is going to be the first time that I'm doing my field work for this research. So I'm very excited about that. And about my project, I am interested in knowing about the role of riparian communities in cross-scalar policies for freshwater ecosystems and their conservation. There's a fisherman in Loreto. This is a picture in Loreto, which is a northern region, Amazonian northern region in Peru. And fisheries are one of the main activities, productive activities, and also represent their connection, the local people connected to rivers. So it's a perfect case for what I'm trying to study. I am going to concentrate my research in the Marañón watershed, and I my main goal with my research is trying to make conservation and sustainable development strategies more accessible to communities. And also, I hope that with my research, I can also serve policymakers so they can design and implement more integrative and accessible policies, freshwater policies, and also trying to, at the same time, improving the conservation of freshwater ecosystems and species who depend on these systems in the long term. So that's what I'm doing.
That's great. Thank you, Tania. We're so proud to be supporting you. So it's nice to have you here tonight as well. Okay, so we're going to start a conversation, and you can all take part in it, or guests. You can go up into the Q&A tool in the right-hand side of your screen, and you should be able to find a chat button there. Type in your question, and then we will do our best to get to all the questions. Okay, so I'm going to start with Nikki. So you referenced coral, the work you're doing on coral, Nikki, and we probably all of us have read about the horrors of what is happening to coral and how important it is that we work to preserve it. So are you doing anything particularly interesting in your research around the sort of how coral is reacting to climate change? Is there anything interesting that you're learning that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, it's working in corals can sometimes be, I would say, depressing because we are often, documenting death. And so I really do try to find the bright spots within coral research because we have to find something. So in climate change, what we are seeing is that there are certain populations of corals that do appear to be tougher to a certain extent. And in particular, what my lab is really researching and what I'm really excited about, and what I think is really a frontiers area of climate change research, is understanding what their immune system is doing. So, corals can't swim away, right? They're stuck on the ground. They have symbiotic algae that live within their tissue, and they get food both from sunlight, as well as from nutrients in the water. And so when there is a disturbance, within their local environment, they have to figure out a way to deal with this. And so one of the things that we're really excited about is that we're seeing that a lot of corals have a really complicated and complex immune reaction. So meaning that they have actually a lot of tricks in their bag that they can use, but we just don't know what it is. So part of my work is just trying to discover, how does the immune system interact with the changing climate, and are there ways in which to actually boost their immune system, much like you see in human health, of trying to boost your immune system and support your immune system? Can we do the same for corals? So that's an area that my lab is really focused on and excited about.
I love that, Nikki. And let's stay with that theme of discovering points of resilience and how organisms and wildlife are finding ways to adapt to climate change, or maybe finding some points of hope. So, Robin, you recently co-authored a paper, Bending the Curve on Global Biodiversity Loss, which I thought was so interesting. I barely understood it, of course, but still thought it was interesting. And I'd love for you to talk for a little, coming off of just what Nikki said, and what it means to bend the curve and how that relates to perhaps some points of hope or where we should be headed in that field.
Great, thanks for that question. Yeah, so this was a paper that I co-authored with multiple other folks from across other conservation organizations. And that's a point of light in and of itself, right? That collaboration across organizations. But what we did is we summarized sort of 6 areas that the global community should be working on if we want to bend that curve of freshwater biodiversity loss. And I won't go through all 6 of those. That would take way too long. Maybe I'll just highlight one of them, time permitting, which is the fact that freshwater ecosystems and the species that are adapted to them really rely on connectivity. And that's especially the case for river systems. So we talk about upstream and downstream connectivity. We talk about lateral connectivity, so a river to its floodplain. We also sometimes talk about vertical connectivity and even temporal connectivity. But in any event, as you might expect, much of that connectivity has been impaired, has been fragmented by things like dams or road crossings or levees that prevent rivers from overtopping their banks and reaching their floodplains. So we know that for freshwater species, fish, other aquatic organisms, this is a real problem, right? They can't complete their life cycles if they don't have that connectivity. So what are some of the things that are happening? How are we trying to address that? Well, I would say one of the most exciting things for me is to see the number of dams around the world, but especially in North America and Western Europe, that are being decommissioned and removed because they've outlived their usefulness. They were built ages ago for a purpose that they no longer serve. So those dams come down. It's kind of fun to watch the time-lapse photography of those being removed, and that's restoring connectivity for those river reaches, and that's really exciting. However, in other parts of the world, we know that things like hydropower facilities, dams, are still going to be built in places that are still looking to build more electric power. And so what we can do in those situations is not say, no dams, all dams are bad. We recognize that people need power. And so we can take more of a systems approach and say, okay, let's look at the big picture of this place and think about where a new hydroelectric facility might serve its purpose, but cause less harm to those freshwater species. And then maybe there's a part of that basin, a river reach or a tributary, where we say it's so important for, let's say, endemic freshwater species there that we want to make sure that it's protected.
That's terrific. And I want to ask Tania a follow-up question, but we got a question in from a viewer. Nikki, over to you. It reads, what can we do in the home on a daily basis to help support healthier ocean habitats?
So I think one very easy thing is examining how much plastic you're using. So that's definitely something that I think is easy to do. And while it's not going to cure climate change, but it can at least help with some of the compounding problems. The other piece is that I would really think about a lot of helping the oceans actually comes from a political level. So are the people that you're, voting for actually supporting taking care of the ocean and supporting, the issues that you care about? And so I think that a lot of people don't realize how powerful their vote and voice can be, and to use that.
Love that. And thank you. And everyone else watching, feel free to add questions. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. Tania, I want to pick up on something that Robin was talking about in the freshwater systems, the importance of connectivity and systems. And I love the work you're doing. Love the pink dolphin. It's become a new favorite of the Conservation Nation team. But I love how you are connecting so closely with the community. You called it the riparian community. So these are the communities living on the rivers, the Amazonian rivers. I love your focus on that. So as you think about the connectivity and the systems, how are you finding that working closely with communities is helping to save freshwater species?
Thank you. I think it's a very complex question that I think I mainly I'm interested in working with communities because my background is with community-based conservation projects, but especially with the topics that Robin was referring to about freshwater systems. They are one of the systems that are understudied, and especially the Amazon. It has a lot of importance in different ecosystem services, but these ecosystem services not only serve the environment, but also serve the communities, the locals who live in there. They have a very, very close connection with freshwater systems like rivers, especially. And with my research, I'm trying to understand how is the freshwater policies specifically, because the management of these resources is a big part of how the condition of freshwater policies and the species that depend on these systems can like have a better better life and better conditions in the long term. And populations have been living there. I think many people would think that the Amazon could be just like a natural space, but it's also a habitat for different groups of populations, indigenous populations, but also populations who come from other regions, and just different diversity, cultural diversity that are connected to rivers. And their role in how these resources are managed and how these habitats have been impacted. It has a lot of connection on how they make their decisions about these resources. Fisheries is one of the main activities in places where I work with, so it's a very important factor to consider for the future of these environments.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Tania. I want to go back to Nikki, more of a personal question. So I love your transparency and honesty on your Weems blog. You have been so straightforward on the blog and in conversations with me about the struggles that you faced personally in breaking in rising up, in staying in, getting beaten down and staying and growing and thriving to get where you are today. And I think that's so brave, and we should all be doing that. And I wondered, did your bravery and honesty help support other women? Did you hear from any other women who were like, yes, Nikki, I've been through the same thing. I thought I was alone. Thank you for this.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like the power of Weems. So when we started meeting, we realized that one, we're not alone. And two, the experiences that we had, while everybody's unique, but we've had a lot of similar things happen. And so having this space to be able to collectively talk about these things, because much of this we don't talk about. It's often,
Yeah.
you're told not to talk about this. And so there's this healing that can occur, really, of being able to be like, I'm not alone in this. And also to realize that, like, this isn't right. Because I think that's the other piece, that sometimes when you're alone and you're experiencing some of these things and, traumas and other things, that you don't always know that it's like, this isn't right. There's other ways that this can happen. And so, and someone should be held accountable for doing this. So I think that for me personally, it's been so powerful to have the space for myself to talk about this, but also to be able to mentor and be around other women who have shared experiences, or can talk to the group and be like, hey, I had this thing happen. Is that normal? And to be like, no, that's not, run away, like, to help them. Or yes, that's okay, but here's the support you need. And so that to me has been huge. And something that I'm hoping that we can expand upon, to actually see that, women, people of color, everybody, we belong in science, right? And our ideas
right.
matter and are innovative. And so, you don't have to suffer alone, and you can get the support that you need. And so, yeah, so writing that blog post was I was scared to do it because it felt very vulnerable. And honestly, that was like the first time I'd ever really put that into writing, my experience.
Yeah.
But after that, it was really powerful, because I realized that it was like, yeah, a lot of people have come up to me and they're like, thanks for sharing that, because I've experienced the same thing, or something similar like that has happened to me. And so, it's interesting how when you are open with your experiences, how much can come out of that, and how being slightly vulnerable can lead to doors opening, that you wouldn't even expect. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. So true and so powerful. Robin, what are your thoughts on that? You've been in the career a long time. What's changed? What did you experience when you first started? How's it feeling now?
Yeah. Yeah. And Nikki, thanks for sharing that first off, because a lot of what you said certainly resonated with me too, maybe in slightly different ways. But I mean, when I joined the field of conservation biology, and I will admit it was about a quarter century ago now, it definitely felt a little bit like a boys' club to me. No one actively excluded me from anything, but there was this expectation that you would, maybe act a certain way to be a part of that club, and I chose not to do that. I almost actively chose not to do that, and in the end, I think it was okay, right? But I probably had to work a little harder along the way. I do think that things have gotten better in a lot of ways. But one thing I would like to just note, and this is not exclusive to being a woman, but when I decided to start a family, I found that I had to make some choices for myself. I work in international environmental conservation. Just getting to the places where I work takes, a day or two. And when you add that up, any trip is a long trip. And I didn't necessarily want to be away from my small children for that length of time. And I didn't necessarily want to be putting in the very intense hours that were required. And so I pulled back. I made a decision to work less, to work fewer hours. And that wasn't something that someone offered to me. I had to know enough that it was okay to ask for that. And it did probably have ramifications for my career. I have no regrets whatsoever about that. Again, I think today, maybe especially because of COVID, I think there's a more open environment to have conversations about how to achieve that balance. But at that time, it felt a little bit like I was going out on a limb there. I'm still here I'm still here. But again, I had to make some choices along the way.
I read a study recently that the number one reason for the leaky pathway in marine and freshwater conservation is because of family obligations and the lack of the ability to manage appropriately balance all of this, and how that burden tends to fall on women. And Nikki, I know you're the mom of twins. Am I right? Am I remembering this right? I mean, right?
Yeah. Twin
That's
4-year-olds.
that's something. So Tania,
Yeah.
now you grew up in the Amazon in Peru, so a very different system than Dr. Traylor-Knowles and Robin Abel. And so as you were growing up and exploring the field of conservation on the water, did you run into issues and barriers and challenges working in the Amazon in a traditionally male field?
Yes, definitely. I think, as Robin was saying, like you usually have to travel a lot. I travel a lot in different places. I have to go to do inventory of different species, and usually there are more male in male members than women. So I struggle with that since the beginning. But I also think that there were some particular struggles of being in remote areas where local people sometimes think that you're unsafe just because you're young or you're female. So there are a lot of risks that you have to assess, and you have to know how to deal with those, because there are also opportunities for you to learn from those experiences. And I think in the field was like that for me. It was kind of like a challenge, but also an opportunity to learn from there. And I think I don't regret any of my experiences. I think it helped me to be where I am, and I'm very grateful for all my volunteerism and my field work. And definitely it was big part of my conservation career.
I love that theme of no regrets, and the three of you have touched on that in your own way, and it's fabulous. We're almost out of time, but I have a ton of questions, so hang on. And I'm just going to pick a few of those. So over to Robin. What advice would you give to young women who want to be conservationists? And really, this is something that anyone can chime in on. And maybe we go around on this. How about one piece of advice for a woman who wants to become a conservationist? And Robin, you go first.
Oh gosh, I might have to pass as I think about this. I think this would be advice for anyone, frankly, which is, don't worry about whether you have the right credentials. And there are so many pathways to becoming a conservationist, and so much need, frankly. And so don't worry about what your resume looks like, or what school you went to, or what degrees you have in front of your name. Just dive in, and it will probably work out.
Fair. Nikki, how about you?
Yeah, I could say it's sort of similar. I would say just don't listen to other people's opinions. So unless they're somebody that you really know and respect, and trust that their opinion is worth listening to, because it's an opinion. So, if you have a passion for something, follow it, and you may not have the best grades, you may not have gone to the best school, but if you really want to do it, follow it. Don't let other people tell you that you're not qualified, because it's just an opinion.
And I love some of those examples from your blog on that. Love that. Tania, so if a girl came up to you in Madre de Dios and said, I want to follow your footsteps, what would be the piece of advice you would give to her?
I actually conducting a mentoring program for Amazonian students right now. So I think one of my advice will be to, like as Nikki was saying, to the perseverance, trying multiple times, even if there are things that don't work out and you feel like disappointment and frustration sometimes, but don't give up. And I think trying different things and different opportunities can open, also valuing your network and your close connection to people. It's very important. Sometimes reaching out when you need something, or when you're lacking something and you feel alone, can be really, really bad. But when you can reach out to people, and even if you don't know them, as Robin was saying, even you can be like as nice and polite, and ask for opportunities. It had been a positive experience for me to reach out to different people and looking for opportunities. That was what I recommend to people in general.
Terrific. And let's end on a question around hope, because we'll paraphrase Jane Goodall, and hope is the answer in all of this right now. And as you think about wildlife conservation, saving species, saving the planet for our children and children to come, and we are all in this together, and thank God for you on the field doing the work that's going to be doing this for generations to come. There's a lot to be depressed about. There's a lot to be worried about and anxious about. But I'm hoping that there are some things that give you hope. And we talked a little bit about it. Nikki, you referenced the coral and some of their reactions and their adaptations. But I'd love to hear from the three of you quickly on hope. Is there anything, and I hope there is, that gives you hope in your work? And I'll start with Robin.
Sure. Well, honestly, the thing that gives me the most hope is panel discussions like this, and knowing that there are organizations like Conservation Nation that are working to help the next generations of prospective conservationists, find their way. Because I do think that younger people who are going to be newer to the field of conservation, are going to bring so many fantastic ideas and perspectives and experiences and voices to the table. And I think implicit in your organization's mission is this idea that historically the conservation community has not been as diverse and inclusive as it might be, and that leads to sort of some, maybe not the most the most diverse thinking. And so I'm really excited about what comes next.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Nikki, how about you? What gives you hope?
The women of Weems give me hope. My students
Yeah.
give me hope. You know, as corny as it sounds, like the younger generations give me hope.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you know, they're evolving, they're pushing things forward, and they're doing things that it's like I couldn't even think of doing at that age. And so I have a lot of hope for the future. I think our ecosystems are going to look different, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily all bad. And so we can figure out ways forward. And for me, definitely, younger generations are really where I'm getting my hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. And quickly, Tania, is there anything in your work that's giving you hope?
Yeah, there's a lot. As I think also my professors, but also my network and people who are working in collective action initiatives, like transdisciplinary groups that are working in from different areas, but they are trying to unify like one same mission. And I think that gives me hope, because I think collective action probably is one of the things that we need to do, like collaborate and surpass our differences, but just like trying to work together, I think. Yeah.
That would be a great topic for another speaker series episode, wouldn't it? About transdisciplinary work and these collective actions and the power of all that. Sadly, we are out of time on this one. So it went so quickly. I am so grateful, dear Nikki, Robin, Tania, for joining us and for this terrific conversation. I'm so grateful to everyone for listening and watching this and for submitting your questions. And there were a ton of questions, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to them, but we can email afterwards on those. And we will be having, this is the first in our series. We're going to have another Conservation Nation Speaker Series episode in April. So stay tuned for that. And if you'd like to learn more about Conservation Nation or support us, please go to conservationnation.org. So a big thank you once again to my wonderful panel. I so appreciated having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.